One day I decided to test if niche games are actually better than popular games. And to test if that's true, I put 7 popular and 7 niche games against each other to see which ones are better, judging by their quality and of course, fun. The answer for you might be obvious, but our first matchup of Forsaken and Game with Evil will probably prove you wrong. We'll compare two asymmetrical horror games, the genre that is famous for being really boring in terms of gameplay. So let's see how that works out. Forsaken, as you know, is an insanely high quality game with a ton of maps and characters to play with. But the devil lies in my opinion, the worst issue in this game, the balance. As with all of the asym games on this platform, Forsaken is heavily siding with killers. For you to survive a 1v1, your killer either has to have a lobotomy or you have to be genuine tryhard at this game. Obviously, that's kind of the point. You are supposed to team up with people and hold off the killer until the round ends. But when you consider that most of the people you'll see will make the game either unfair by tryharding or they just won't help you at all and run away, it's quite hard to enjoy this, at least in my experience. So Forsaken gets a quality score of 8 and a fun score of 6, giving it a total of 14 points, in case you don't know how to do math. But how will it fare against Game with Evil? Yeah, not a chance, bro, not a chance. Because Game with Evil is basically Forsaken, traded its giant developer team and its visuals for a little bit more gameplay variety. It is quite fun to juke killers around, likewise it is fun to hunt down the survivors, yet the core issue for me is all the same. It's an asym. Therefore, it's still an occasional ability spam mixed with running. Game with Evil gets a quality score of 6 and a fun score of 7, netting in a total of 13 points, meaning it lost to a popular game. Though our next matchup of Doors and Delusional Office will be actually much closer than this, because Doors really needs no introduction. A legendary Roblox game that basically revived the entire shtick of high-quality horror games, with a unique design, innovative gameplay loop, and many more glazing terms that I'm sure you guys would understand. Personally, I'm a big fan of how easy it is to understand, but how deep this game can get with its numerous mechanics and years worth of polishing. In my opinion, Doors is the first game on the platform that proved that genuinely unique design and gameplay can make it big. But what about its recent competitor? Obviously, Delusional Office lost a ton when we look at their player counts, but these two games are actually very similar, with the exception of Delusional Office being more focused towards gameplay rather than graphics or unique design. You have a lot more perks and monsters to look out for, while also having to watch your speed carefully, because in Doors you can't stop at any time and continue walking. But in Delusional Office, you could literally go Mach 5 speeds, but if you stop for a few seconds, your efforts are wasted. Again, truly speaking, I would not like to give these games a rating. They're both amazing in their own right, and both are insanely high quality, and I had a ton of fun playing both of them, but for the sake of this video, I will say that Doors gets a quality score of 10 and a fun score of 9, while Delusional Office gets a quality score of 7 and a fun score of 10. This was probably expected, but Delusional Office with its literal 100 concurrent players went toe-to-toe with one of the greatest high-quality games that actually made it onto the front page. So that deserves a big round of applause for the developers. Yep, there we go. Yep, there we go, guys. Yoo-hoo! I'm still an absolute sucker for both of these, and I play them occasionally myself. But our next matchup, though, is between a game with over 100,000 players, which is my subscriber goal, and it'd be great if you could help me with that, and another one has just 200. I'm talking about Dandy's World versus Depth Spelunking. This is an unusual matchup, but it's amazing how these games could look so different while also playing basically the same. Because Dandy's World is a Delver-like game, term coined by Dayorg by the way, where you go through underground floors on an elevator, collect resources, and evade enemies, while also unlocking new abilities. This game is actually kinda silly, and I wouldn't lie to you if I said that it was really boring. Not only was it too easy, especially with multiple people, but like the monsters don't even make sense, dude. This one motherfucker was just standing there looking at me while I was doing my task, and speaking of tasks, they're all the same on every floor. Granted, I played only the first few floors for like 20 minutes, but Depth Spelunking in that time frame was completely different. This game has an insane amount of monsters and just as much fun, even with a ton of people, which actually makes it even better. The first few levels are really easy, but once you get into levels with multiple entities, this game becomes a genuine fight for survival, while also juggling a lot of unique puzzles you gotta solve. Dandy's World, for that reason, gets a quality score of 5 and a fun score of 6. Really bad result for a game with this many players. While Depth Spelunking gets a quality score of 7 and a fun rating of 8. A pretty high score. You can also suggest more games for my videos in my Discord server, I'm just saying. But our next matchup will be basically a comparison of a typical front page game and a game made with passion, because I'm talking about Tower of Hell and Eternal Towers of Hell. Tower of Hell is the game that needs no introduction, because you just go through towers, buy some cool effects, and this is mostly a game for I don't even know who,
really? Because this is way too boring, dude. There's not much to say about this game, aside from the fact that you would only probably play it when you're talking in the chat with someone. And so the Tower of Hell gets a quality score of 4 and a fun rating of 5. It is the worst rating in our video yet. Now, Eternal Towers of Hell is a whole another story because it's amazing. This is a legendary Roblox game that every try-hard player knows, mostly because it has some of the hardest obbies on the entire platform. Not only that, but every tower can last from 10 minutes to literal hours of gameplay. And I'm not talking about it like they're easy. If you're playing on any tower higher than an intermediate, they will occupy you for some time, requiring you to solve light puzzles along the way, so they make your brain work, unlike its popular counterpart. You have jump ropes, movable objects, buttons, balloons, zip lines, even more. And this is just in one tower, when there's more than 400 of them in this game. If you played each one for even 10 minutes and you just left, you would have 3 days worth of playtime. Like, this is insane! Eternal Towers of Hell gets a quality score of 8 and a fun score of 9. Truly amazing representation for the obby genre on Roblox. However, this next matchup convinced me that some of my viewers are just die-hard fans of games, and sometimes it's not a good thing, because we'll be comparing Deep Woken and Absolvement. Deep Woken is one of those games that a small number of people will be ready to die for, but for me personally, I can only say that this game was, alright, I guess? Because Deep Woken is a really big RPG with more features and mechanics that I could ever explain in this video. But just know that this game is massive, like hundreds of hours of gameplay if you really wanted to. The problem with that, however, is that unless you're really into diving into details and all of the mechanics, this game will suck. It is one of the worst games you could play if you were looking for something quick and fun. Absolvement, on the other hand, while still being very complex, has a relatively straightforward way of playing. Just upgrade your abilities and go through dungeons, maybe buy and sell some stuff along the way. But that's actually the fun part of it, because I could play a simple game of just dungeon crawling, or I could intricately and meticulously dive deep into every detail. That's what a good game is. It can satisfy both casual players and hardcore, but Deep Woken, yeah, you know how it goes. The only thing I got out of my Deep Woken gameplay was that I died literally 4 times, got beaten up by some random guy, got lost at sea, and eventually quit the game. Is it fair to call the game bad? Definitely not. It's still really good, but not in terms of quality or fun for me. So Deep Woken gets a quality score of 6 and a fun score of 7, while Absolvement gets a high quality score of 8 and a fun score of 8 again. Really good results actually. But again, I gave it this high of a score purely because of how simple but actually hardcore this game can be. But our next matchup of Bite by Night and Die of Death is a proof that when people really love a game and always recommend it to me, it's not always a good thing. Because Bite by Night is a recently released action horror game with just shy of 150,000 players that combines typical Asian game with staff, meaning you have to run away from the killers, use your abilities, do tasks, and survive until 6 AM. However, the best thing about this game is that the developers f***ing locked in and made the game not only look very good, but also balanced. Somehow, you are able to survive a 1v1 with the killer, and likewise, you are able to work together as a team against them. Bite by Night achieves this perfect level of balance purely because of level design. There are doors you can barricade, and lots of pathways you can try to take to confuse the killer. Cooldown on the abilities is also very lax, and thus allows you to use your most powerful weapons very frequently. Likewise, killers are also not exactly powerless. They have multiple abilities, both attacking and utility ones, but this game is more applying your brains in order to trick the other team. In this footage you're seeing right now, you can see how the only reason I survived the LMS was because I was really confusing the killer with my run strats. And that's not something you could do in Forsaken, because all of the levels there are mostly open, and there's a lot of open space, unlike in here, where most maps are closed off. In other words, Bite by Night achieved a near perfect level of balance. But how can Die of Death compare to it? Hey! Die of Death is probably the most generic game in this video, with the only difference being very retro and actually looking very cool. But that's about all I can say. It's the same ASIM situation, being very based on cooldown management, and all of the maps here are very open, and thus, you're very unlikely to outsmart the killer besides basic juking. It's not the worst ASIM game at all, because this game adds a feature of random perks and abilities being given to you at the start of each round, making the game much more randomized and satisfying. But if a killer has you in his sights and he doesn't let you go, you're basically done for, if he doesn't target someone else. Same could be said about Bite by Night, but in there you can run away for long enough to make the killer target someone else for a while you and your team repair the generators. In other words, Bite by Night is getting a quality rating of 9 and a fun rating of... I can't believe I'm saying this, but an ASIM game is receiving a fun rating of 10, while Die of Death is receiving a quality rating of 7 and a fun rating of 6. I don't know what to say because people were yelling at me to review Die of Death. Maybe it would have gotten a higher rating if there wasn't a beta racing game, but our next matchup will be between a legendary natural disaster survival and Something Evil Will Happen, two games that couldn't be any more similar and different at the same time. Natural disaster survival is one of the most known games on the platform, and it lived on for a long time, and it still does actually. With over 10,000 people on a consistent basis, it's actually quite an achievement for this game to keep up this many players without any updates. You just survive disasters at different maps, nothing special. No items to get, except ones for Robux, you know the deal. Something Evil Will Happen developers looked at this formula, probably threw away their PC and decided to fully lock in, making basically a superior game in every aspect. I'll call this game Evil from now on, just not to say the entire name. But Evil has a ton of items to buy, emotes to use, and of course, a ton of special disasters in their combination. One round can be a calm sightseeing tour, and the other one is if hell rained on this earth. In other words, literally a better game. No aspect of NDS is better than its counterpart in Evil. So obviously the quality rating of NDS is 6 and the fun rating of 6. Of course, it's a revolutionary game with its own charm, but Evil is just better to play, like come on. Speaking of it, it gets a quality rating of 8 and a fun rating of 8. And so our final score is Tower of Hell 9 points, Dandy's World 11 points, NDS 12 points,
Game Broken 13 points,
Game with Evil 13 points, Die of Death is 13 points, Forsaken 14 points, Depth Spelunking 15 points, Something Evil Will Happen 16 points,
Absolvement 16 points,
Eternal Towers of Hell 17 points, Delusional Office 18 points, Fight by Night 18 points,
and the winner of this video is Doors with 19 points.
Meaning that on average, underrated games have been better than popular ones. But that also means that with enough time and proper management, popular games can be actually very good, as we can see by Doors and Fight by Night examples. These scores are insane achievements for these underrated games, and obviously all of the scores are just my personal opinions. They don't imply any of the games in this video were bad. Every game here has its strong and weak sides, yet you should still play all of them. Subscribe and join my Discord server.